One of Napoleon Bonaparte's biggest blunders was his ill-fated invasion of Russia, but let's not forget the other debacle, France's invasion of Spain. Instead of a swift victory, the Spanish resistance dragged the conflict out for 7 grueling years, draining French resources and tying up hundreds of thousands of French soldiers in the Iberian Peninsula. So, what if Napoleon had simply skipped Spain and used those troops elsewhere? Could he have conquered Russia and emerged victorious in the Napoleonic Wars? I'll answer that with 3 possible outcomes by the end of this video, but before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. For context, the Peninsular War started because Napoleon wanted to invade Portugal, a British ally, and incorporate it into the continental system, a trade blockade against Britain. Spain was in the way, but Napoleon, mistrusting Spain's ruler Ferdinand VII, decided to invade Spain in 1807. Historically, Ferdinand was indeed problematic, as his return from exile in 1814 led to turmoil in South America and the independence of Spanish colonies. In our alternate history, Napoleon opts to keep Ferdinand in charge of Spain, preserving their alliance and freeing up hundreds of thousands of French troops. At any given time, 300,000 French soldiers were bogged down in Spain. The war caused around 1 million casualties, including civilians. By not invading, Napoleon gains a massive army for other fronts. Assuming Britain doesn't start the Peninsular War, a big if, Napoleon could quickly crush any British attempts to land in Iberia, as he did at the Battle of Corunna in 1809. Spain's colonies would be harassed by Britain, leading to a more self-sufficient and stable Spanish Empire. Now, let's consider the 1812 scenarios. Napoleon historically invaded Russia, while the United States declared war on Britain. In our alternate timeline, Napoleon could aid the United States or focus entirely on Russia. In the first scenario, Napoleon helps the US. If Spain, allied with France, sends troops from Mexico, the US might successfully conquer Canada. This alliance, coupled with Napoleon's military genius, could spell trouble for Britain. Though French troops crossing the Atlantic is a logistical nightmare, it's a fun thought. Imagine French soldiers in coonskin caps. Eventually, with Britain losing Canada and struggling in Europe, they might surrender. Napoleon wins the Napoleonic Wars, but still dies in the 1820s. Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia likely invade a weakened France afterward, but Britain doesn't get Canada back. Spain, not bogged down in the Peninsular War, keeps its colonies intact. The second scenario is Napoleon focusing on Russia with his surplus troops. Despite having 500,000 more soldiers, the outcome might be even worse. Napoleon's Russian campaign failed due to logistical nightmares, not lack of manpower. Sending more troops into the harsh Russian winter without adequate supplies would lead to even greater losses. Historically, Napoleon's Grand Army of 600,000 was decimated, and more soldiers mean more bodies left behind in the snow. Alternatively, Napoleon could take a more cautious approach, occupying Belarus, the Baltics, and Ukraine. This slower, more methodical campaign might force Russia to capitulate after a few years. However, this strategy breaks from Napoleon's character, which was all about quick, decisive victories. So, in our realistic alternate scenario, the same disaster unfolds. Napoleon's depleted forces and the subsequent betrayal by Austria and Prussia lead to a quicker and more thorough defeat in the War of the Sixth Coalition. Napoleon, embarrassed and with no army, might be ousted before returning to France, leading to his downfall before Waterloo. Finally, the secret ending. Napoleon keeps his extra troops in reserve while invading Russia with the same number as historically. This prevents Austria and Prussia from betraying him, as they are deterred by his reserve forces. Napoleon transfers conquered territories to Austria and Prussia, preventing a Sixth Coalition war. Russia can't advance deep into Europe, and Napoleon's alliances hold. This stalemate leaves Napoleon as the master of Europe until his death in the 1820s. His young successor, Napoleon II, might be challenged by Britain and Russia, but that's a story for another time. In all scenarios, Spain likely keeps its colonies. Without the Peninsular War, Spain grants more autonomy to its colonies, stabilizing its empire. Spain is now a ready participant in any future global conflicts, potentially changing the course of history. In this alternate timeline, Napoleon might have avoided his biggest blunders, but history teaches us that more soldiers don't guarantee victory, especially against the icy grip of a Russian winter. For Napoleon, even in victory, the cold, hard truth remains: winter is coming.